very warm welcome to this webinar. On behalf of the entire RREUSE network and the RREUSE team, we're excited to be able to organize the launch of our latest report on targets for preparing for reuse and reuse in the EU. We are doing this within the European Week for Waste Reduction, and we're very excited that this also enabled us to promote our webinar more and to attract a large and very relevant audience. I'm Neva Nachtigal, I'm the Director of RREUSE. I will be the moderator today. To begin with, let me just give you some housekeeping notes. One, because we have a lot of content to present and because we have multiple really interesting speakers, we will want to integrate moments to interact with the audience, but we will not be able to do so by inviting you all to speak. So I invite you to actually interact also via chat. You're welcome to do so amongst yourselves or each other, and maybe speakers, if you want to look at the chat and engage with something, you're also welcome to do so. But in the moments where we have two moments foreseen for interactions, and at that time we will take a few questions from the chat. At least we're aiming to do so. And whether or not this will be possible depends on whether or not our speakers will be able to stay within the strict time limits that we gave them. So let's see how it goes. It's a common effort. And now that we are through with this housekeeping, I would like to just give you a very brief introduction as to what we will be talking about and what we will be doing today. If you could go ahead, Marie-Jeanne, with the next slide. So as I said, this is a report. We commissioned this research. The research itself was undertaken externally. Then we reviewed it very carefully. There was a lot of involvement also of our network. And then what we did was that we developed the policy recommendations ourselves. So those were developed within the RREUSE network and are endorsed by the RREUSE network. So the report comes with these two parts, the research and the policy recommendations. All right, excellent. So now to tell you what the aim of this research was, it was to map existing reuse and preparing for reuse targets in the EU, to examine their context, characteristics, and impacts, and to offer insights into the benefits that are associated with different types of targets. So environmental, social, and economic benefits, as much as it was possible to either get the data or assess these. Next slide, Marie-Jeanne. And today what we will do, or what we would like to do, we would like to present our research findings very briefly. Of course, we hope that you will then read the full report and really get all the details, and present our policy recommendations. We would like for all of us to learn from national experts who have been invited to share their insights as our speakers, and to discuss opportunities to place reuse at the heart of EU policymaking. That for us as RREUSE is really an essential objective of all our work, not just this. It's fine. So now, why do we need the targets, at least according to us? One, we all see the massive overproduction and the waste crisis that we are in. In the report, you can also see we cited some figures to illustrate this. It's no secret that we are facing waste crisis. We all talk about fast fashion and problems with textiles, but there are also massive issues with electronics and basically all of consumer goods, and everything that we are using in our everyday lives becomes waste way too fast, and there's way too much of it. And we always argue, and there's data to show this, that reuse is the best circular case. It makes sense environmentally, socially, and economically. It's the best option to extend the lifetime of the goods and prevent consumption of new goods. But what we see is that there's lack of policy and infrastructure to really unlock reuse's full potential. We see these gaps at all levels of governance, including the EU, of course. And as we have been saying for many years, targets are a key instrument to put reuse at the core of circular economy strategies. And that is the case that we try to make and highlight and underscore with the report that we are launching today, and that you can already find on our website. And at the end of the webinar, there will be a QR code, so we'll be able to very easily find it. Next slide, Marie-Jeanne. All right, and I'm very, very delighted to be able to welcome our guest speakers. They will be coming in. This is something also to tell you. The webinar is designed to be as dynamic as possible. So we will be intersecting our our own presentation with interaction with the speakers. So it's not first the presentation and then a panel. We will be doing this as we go. But our guest speakers here today, I'm really delighted to welcome in alphabetical order, to be clear, Nicolas Denis from RREUSE, Italy, a member of our network. Welcome, Nicolas. Mr. Rasmus Nordqvist, a member of European Parliament from the Greens. Welcome to you as well, and thank you for being here. Vanessa Savoini from Recupel, Belgium. We will hear more about the organization, but it's an extended producer responsibility scheme. That's it. And Rebecca Wilson from Rediscovery Center in Ireland, also a member of REUSE. And of course, all of you are invited because you have very highly relevant insights to share in the context of this launch. And welcome to all of you. And then I will invite you to answer the questions that we have as we are doing right now. So we will start, excuse me. So we will start with the first question, because I declared on behalf of the REUSE network that there are very big gaps in legislation at all levels when it comes to ensuring the full deployment of reuse. So I would now like to ask you, from your perspective, what do you see as the main gaps in EU legislation when it comes to this? So in ensuring that reuse is really deployed to its full potential. And just a reminder, we allocated 5 minutes, and I will give you a notice when you have 1 minute left.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. This is a topic I love to talk about. So also, as soon as I got the invitation, I was like, yeah, what a good setting to have this discussion as well. First, I have to say, I mean, the gap is not only there when it's about reuse, it's about recycling as well. I mean, there has been in EU legislation talk about circular economy for years with nice words, and there's still a lot of gaps there when it comes to the whole palette of circular economy. When we talk about reuse, I mean, it's what I have tried to do is really go through the legislation as already is, because we have good legislation. But first of all, it's very slow in implementation. And second of all, it could be done with a lot more ambition. So that's what I'm also hoping for, to be part of the Common Circular Economy Act, is actually to get the speed and to get the ambitions in. Because I mean, a key for me when you talk about reuse is eco-design, because it's about how do we design product. I mean, my background is design, so I also focus that a lot happens before we're producing. How do we think a product? How do we think the use of the product? All these parts, and that is already with the eco-design, that we have the possibilities of mainstreaming durability, reuse, repairability, all these things. But it needs to be implemented fast and ambitious, and we still have product groups we're waiting for. Textile is an area where we could really use some specific tools in the eco-design. And then another part of the whole prevention part of it is also in the Waste Framework Directive. I think we have a lot of opportunities when you look at the legislation, but again, they haven't been used. Specifically, I think when we talk about the extended producer responsibility, we know there's going to be a revision, both Circular Economy Act, but also Single Market Strategy. There's coming something. And what I hope is that we actually both get financing from the EPR systems to the whole prevention, reuse, repair sector. We need funding. It's also to look at, I mean, good solutions already out there. Look to France with their bonus. I think, how could we take that on an EU level and ask all the member states to implement it? But it's also in the eco-modulation of the EPR system that quite often it's only designed to actually say, how can we get some money in so we can clean up the mess? But we could also use the EPR schemes actually to get the products we want. And that goes both for reuse, it goes for recycling as well. I think we should be much more ambitious when we work on them. I hope with the newly changes in the Waste Framework Directive on textiles that we're going to get some more active use of the EPR schemes, because the possibilities in the legislation is there. But of course, we'll see how it goes. And I'll be following that very closely, both here on EU level, but also through colleagues in national parliaments. Then the last thing I would say here now, it's the public procurement. I think we also need to create this market for reuse, and with 40% of the European GDP going in public procurement, just to mirror that against the total budget of the EU, which is around 1.15 in the newest versions. I mean, 14%. Imagine if we use that also for refurbish of products, use it so local municipality can actually make the right decisions. I made that in 5 minutes.
You made it in 4. I am actually using a stopwatch. I do it for myself too when I speak. Excellent, thank you. And many of these things, of course, are music to our ears, especially when it comes to reforming the EPR to make sure that the reuse repair sector are funded, eco-modulation, and so on. Many things were really aligned with what we also think should happen. You did have a little provocation in the chat. You're welcome to take a look at that if you would like. But now, before we go to the report itself, I said before, I made these claims about, that there's a waste crisis, there's not enough measures, and so on. So to give it more meat, let's say, I would like to now ask Nicolas Denis to describe the situation regarding the reuse of waste from electronic and electrical equipment in Italy. This is what you focus on. This is really your specialism. So please describe how it is and what do you think is missing? And you also have 5 minutes.
Yes, of course. So thank you for the invitation. So I will describe something that is far from what the previous speaker was saying, because I consider Italy to be like little kind of Cinderella from the legislative point of view in Europe on these kind of things. I splitted my consideration in two groups. The reuse of electronic goods, okay, so not waste and no preparation for reuse, are a kind of patchwork of different kind of organization, as in many countries in Europe. So you have charities, you have large companies, you have I don't know, IT firms or resale shops, or you have private people just selling on platforms. Okay, so there is no reuse operator formally in the law. We do not have any recognition of the existence of being a reuse operator. And this is a big problem here, because it means that we don't have any, rigorous, strict information on reuse. And this is a big point, a big lack, I would say. No? On the other side, what is called the preparation for reuse, which is the activity you do on the waste, and you take waste and transform it again in a good. Italy here is really the Cinderella, in the meaning that we had a preparation for reuse law just 2 years ago. Preparation for reuse comes from a directive of 2008. So I mean, we are 10 years late, more than 10 years late, okay? And this is common here in Italy and also in other countries, of course. It happens. So before we were speaking about implementation, yes, implementation is a big problem, especially regarding to directives. When we have regulation, of course, things go faster. And this is a big problem because the law on preparation for use in Italy is quite tricky, because it includes some standards, Sensenelec standards, that not easy for a lot of kind of organization. And I expect that we won't have a lot of companies or organization doing preparation for use of electronic waste. This is another problem we have here. So what we miss first of all is somehow a way to connect all operators inside measurement, inside policy, and to have a wider view on the sector. Then we will have the opportunity to to ask to politics for intervention on these kind of things, both on the prevention side and on the waste management side, that in my opinion should work together, of course. So this is the situation we have here in Italy, and I'm really curious to see what will happen in with the revision of the WE directive, and also on APR schemes. That is a really important thing that here in Italy is not working at all, of course, because APR schemes here in Italy are really, how to say, closed, not accessible to stakeholders at all. So that's more or less the panorama here in Italy.
Thank you very much, Nicola. I see we were actually too generous with giving you all 5 minutes. It's fantastic. And now, having had this flavor of what we think is missing and should happen both at the EU level and in a specific country, now we will go to the report highlights, where our environmental policy lead, Marijan, will present and start first with a review of some relevant policies. There you go, Marijan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. I will just briefly recap what we will look into in this webinar, because of course we cannot present the whole report. You have the QR code at the end to read it and take the time to look at all the insight. But today we will focus on the most relevant EU policies when it comes to reuse and preparing for reuse targets. We will also take a little overview of the existing targets in EU member states, and also we will present you our policy recommendation. But to begin with, we're gonna look into a little bit more of the context, even though Rasmus and Nicola already introduced a little bit some of those key legislations. The first one is the Waste Framework Directive, which introduces key definitions such as preparing for reuse and reuse, and also key principles such as the waste hierarchy. It also encourages member states to establish quantitative targets. And when it comes to more sectoral issue, for example, textiles, but also municipal waste, some targets are either considered for the future. For example, in the targeted revision of the Waste Framework Directive, there is a review clause which considers the setting of targets for collection, preparing for reuse, recycling by 2029. And the WFD also sets combined targets for preparing for reuse and recycling of municipal waste. Member states need to achieve 55% of this by this year, actually. Now, another sectoral legislation is the RREUSE Directive, which aims to improve the collection, treatment, and recycling of e-waste. The directive sets a target for collection of e-waste, but not specific targets for preparing for reuse. The revision of the directive from 2012 actually say that it would examine the possibility of setting separate preparing for reuse targets by 2016, but clearly this did not happen. And the most recent evaluation report dated from this year specifically mentioned that specific reuse target should be considered. So maybe there's a little bit of hope here. And another aspect that's important to look at is the methodology that is being developed at the EU level to report on reuse, because we know that data is crucial and it's at the basis of any future or existing targets. So the Waste Framework Directive mandate member states to conduct qualitative surveys every year and quantitative assessments every 3 years. And the RREUSE Directive introduce also an obligation for member states to report the quantities prepared for reuse to the European Commission. And it also introduced some methodologies to calculate the weight of electronic and electronical equipment put on the market, and also the quantity of wheat generated per year. So with this, we have a little overview of the existing legislation.
Thank you. And now we will actually go right back to Mr. Nordquist ask, because we are talking here about EU policies, and of course you already presented a bit your vision as to what's missing and talked about what could happen. But now I have a questions very specifically: what could EU institutions do to promote reuse more, and how do you see the setting of reuse and preparing for reuse targets in this context?
Yes, thank you. First, I would just comment on what was written in the chat, because I think it's very saying for the discussion we have right now. When we talk about eco-design can do something if we use it, EPR schemes can as well. I mean, I often get the comment, yes, but it's not going to solve it. And I just have to be really honest with all of you. We're not going to solve the crisis we're standing in when it comes to waste and when it comes to our consumption with one little instrument. We need to use the whole palette, and eco design is key. So is EPR scheme. So is setting targets, as you also said now, because it helps us guide the policies we're doing. But if we think we can do anything here just with one little tool and magic, then we'll change the whole pattern of consumption and longevity of products and all these things. I'm gonna really say sorry. We need more. We need to use it all, and all are key instruments. Also the targets, as you're asking about now. But I think it's also about how we set these targets, and especially with the revision coming up. We know. I mean, I think it's very important that we are more specific when it comes to both our recovery, the recycling, and the reuse targets. So it's not just on the weight as it has been, but we actually go down in details. And that will be a change if we can get that through. I think that is very important. But another thing we need to do when we talk about promoting reuse is actually using trade measures to get prices on new stuff up. Because the biggest problem when we talk about this is new is too cheap. And that goes both for reuse, but it also goes for recycling. We cannot just talk about getting prices down and using bonuses and stuff like that to get repairs cheaper and all these things, because we're never going to compete when plastic can be produced at the prices they're coming in right now on all polymers, whether it's polyester or PT, so forth, from China. We cannot compete. So we need the prices up on virgin materials. And I really hope that now that we had the simplification of CBAM, that we actually will start using it now actively, extend the scope to both chemicals, but specifically polymers, because that is our biggest problem. I mean, you look at all the consumption rates on polymers, whether it's plastic as it is, or the polyester in the textile fashion industry. I mean, it's just going up at an extreme rate, and none of that is going to be solved unless we get the prices up. And again, I just have to say, we don't have to invent the wheel. We have legislation we can use. And there, the CBAM, I really hope, will be thought into the circular economy action as well. So yeah, that would be my two main points. But really, this again, I mean, let's stop this fantasy about one thing is gonna solve it all. But we need EPRs. We need eco design to actually work. And I can just tell you right now, the Commission needs a lot of push and tender loving care to have the ambitions they need, because it's not coming right now politically. When I look around my colleagues in this house, I don't see it in the council either. So we need to push them gently but firmly, and give them all the good ideas and all the great creative solutions we have. But if we keep saying you're not going to solve it with one or the other thing, then we're not going to achieve anything.
Thank you very much. I know I will not invite the person to unmute, but I know that the person who wrote in the chat that just for those who didn't see the chat, that eco design is not going to basically counter the over consumption and overproduction. Just to say, I know that person does not mean that would be the one instrument. We as RREUSE also, of course, as a network, advocate for a wide array of measures, and fully agree with you that all of the tools should be deployed, and especially everything that can counter overproduction itself, such as, for example, we saw now the anti-fast fashion law in France and instruments like that, where you really go to the heart of the issue, which is effectively that there's just too much stuff produced in completely unsustainable manner.
It was not to attack any specific
Oh,
person.
no,
It's
of
just
course.
because I hear it a lot loads of debates on circular economy, and I always hear these points, and that's why I made it here as well.
Yes, but the fact that you did is also very good for us, because it's exactly what we also advocate for. And also, thank you very much for acknowledging that the reuse targets and preparing for reuse targets are also essential in this mix of from the policy toolbox. Indeed, it's a big toolbox. And now we all can just hope that the Commission will reach deep into it and take out some power tools, not just some small little screwdriver somewhere for the one we use for glasses fixing, which is what maybe can be feared, but let's hope not. All right, thank you so much for this. I also just want to notify, so that it's not weird later, that you actually have to leave around 3. So then we will give you an opportunity, and the audience the opportunity to interact before you have to go. Thank you. Now that we have heard about the EU perspective or EU level perspective, we will turn to existing targets in EU member states, and back to Marijan.
Thank you. So our report really provides quite a unique mapping of the existing targets in the EU, targets for reuse and preparing for reuse. We analyzed that currently there are 24 targets in 7 different member states. And I will not wait any longer before presenting which one they are. So we mapped targets for 6 different waste streams. Targets for municipal waste, which are present in Denmark, France, Portugal, and Spain. Targets for we know, so I said there are some recovery targets for we in the WE directive, but they are only preparing for reuse targets in Belgium, in the three different Belgian regions, in France and Spain. There are targets for mattresses and furniture in 2 countries, namely Belgium and France. For textiles, there are targets in some of the countries that have the EPR scheme for textile already in place, in France and Netherlands. And we put Spain here, but actually it's only Catalonia, and in Catalonia it's only a voluntary target. In only 1 country, in France, there are targets for construction materials, and for all consumer goods, it's in Belgium and Ireland. To be able to understand what we are talking about, we did this mapping exercise, but also a mapping of the different features and variations when it comes to targets. So we analyze target depending on their scope. Are they covering waste, non-waste, or both waste and non-waste streams? Are they binding or not? Which channels do they include? Is it formal activities, formal reuse activities only? Is it also informal reuse activities, activities under the EPR schemes, or actors like social enterprises or local authorities? One important aspect is the type of indicator that is used here. So do we set and measure the target based on the kilogram per inhabitant per year, or is it per the percentage of waste collected, or what is put on the market, or also the total tonnage, or the total items? And finally, we looked at the different point of measurement. Here it can be at the point of collection in view of being reused, or at the point of made available for reuse, or the point of sale for secondhand, or at the point of donation.
Thank you, Marijan. And now, to illustrate, instead of presenting individual targets, we invited, as mentioned, national experts. So we will hear a bit about the targets, the reuse target in Ireland. It's a fairly recent development, I believe, from last year only. And it is a reuse target for all consumer goods. And I would like to ask Rebecca, so how did this process of developing reuse targets in Ireland unfold? I just saw in the chat that this is happening at the moment in the Czech Republic. So it's probably interesting to hear how the experience was in Ireland and what roles the different actors play, including your own organization, in this whole process. And you have 5 minutes like the other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You can tell we like targets on this call because we even have targets for our time, which are going really well. I suppose to really understand the targets development in Ireland, just to provide some policy context and kind of the structural realities, I suppose, working within the Irish system, that Ireland is quite different in comparison to our EU colleagues because we have a privatized waste system where our local authorities are operating civic amenity sites. So unlike our European colleagues, there isn't that built-in incentive for local authorities to champion reuse or repair. So reuse activity here, so charity shops, social enterprises, secondhand retail has really developed outside of the waste stream. And that kind of meant that from the outset that there wasn't a clear ownership of reuse. So it became a bit of a challenge in 2018 with the Waste Framework Directive. Where it required member states to monitor and report on reuse and signaled the potential for EU-wide targets. And I suppose the Rediscovery Centre and other actors in the field really knew that if we didn't take early action to build a methodology, it'd be very difficult to retrofit a measurement into a system that, again, wasn't designed to support it. So ourselves in the Rediscovery Centre, we're the National Centre for the Circular Economy in Ireland, along with the Clean Technology Centre and CRNI and the Eastern Midlands region, we formed a consortium to submit to the the Environmental Protection Agency a research project called Qualifying and Quantifying the Reuse Sector in Ireland. And that report is available online for people to have a look at, but I'll talk a little bit about that. And it was the first of its type in terms of this comprehensive analysis of the reuse sector in Ireland. And I actually wasn't in the Rediscovery Centre at the time, but I can say it was an enormous piece of work when I look at it and what the team did and the partners did. So they mapped and built a database of over 1,200 reuse practitioners right across the country, charity shops, commercial secondhand retailers, specialist outlets, community reuse organisations, the list goes on. And the report developed a decision tree and a national flowchart that defined of what counts of reuse in an Irish context and where those measurement points are. The team carried out a qualitative and quantitative surveys to understand the data the sector currently collects, which is quite small, where those exchange points were and what was realistically measurable. Again, recognizing this is outside a formal structure, it's happening in various different ways. And overall, the findings really clear. Most organizations track really limited data. Many don't have kind of EPOS systems and they rely on volunteers and a manual process. So there was no consistent categorization of products. And really importantly, the report looked and concluded that without sustained technological and financial support, the sector would really not be able to comply or provide the data required for European reporting. So all of those insights then fed into the development of Ireland's national reuse methodology and our Circular Economy Act, which was providing the basis for statutory targets. And the Waste Management Plan for the Circular Economy set a 10 kilogram per person reuse target, drawing from both EU proposals and this work that we did for the Environmental Protection Agency. And that the EPA has published the methodology last year, with the first official reporting due next year. So maybe this time next year we'll have a bit more of an update on that.
1 minute, Rebecca.
Thank you. Throughout the entire process, I suppose the Rediscovery Centre played a really central leadership role in this. We contributed to the research, the methodologies, and worked directly with practitioners. But really importantly, we've advocated for stronger governance and proper support systems. And the core message has remained the same. And it's really reflected in the report that the targets alone will not achieve the change. But when those meaningful targets now exist, investment then flows to that. But when there's no support, there's no training, no central coordination, that burden is falling on those small, under-resourced reuse organization. And it's a risk that without, the targets won't become proper targets without those instruments for real change.
Thank you very much. You hit the target, Rebecca. Thank you. And now we will go. We mentioned that there are also reuse targets in... Rebecca, could you mute? Okay, thank you. Yeah, we heard that there are also reuse targets in Belgium, but Belgium, of course, is a complicated country with the regions. So we will actually be looking at Flanders specifically, so the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium. And we have with us Vanessa Savoini from Recupel. And I would like to ask you, Vanessa, to please briefly describe your work with We Reuse and tell us about reuse targets and the role they play in the We EPR in Flanders.
Yes.
Also 5 minutes, please.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak here. I already heard a lot of very inspiring things. So as we were saying, we have targets set for Flanders and the Brussels region. You may know that Belgium is divided in 3 regions.
Sorry, Vanessa, excuse me. You will have to tell Marie-Jeanne when to go with the slides because your presentation is
You can go with the slide, but actually I'm thinking, I wonder if there is a need, but because it's a complicated issue in Belgium with all the different environmental laws in the different regions, I thought a visual support was needed, but so yes, Recupel is the EPR scheme for collecting electronic appliances and lamps, and we give them a second life through reuse and recycling. Next slide. We do have different targets. So there is the target for collection, 65%. Every European member state has this target for collection of WE. And then in Flanders and in Brussels, we have 2 different reuse targets because environmental law is a regional competence. The target, we can go to the next slide. The target in Flanders is set on the reuse volumes that are sold by social economy actors. So basically, in Flanders, you have 27 kringloopcentra, they're called like that. They are reuse centers that are within the social economy. Their mission is threefold. They have to give work to people who have a gap from the labor market. They have to sell items at 1/3 of the price, and they have an environmental mission as well to reduce waste. So they are our partners, but this means we have a limited number of people, of organizations we work with. And what they sell every year are our reuse numbers. So they report to us. This is for Flanders, and they are under the Federation Herwin, which is a member of the reuse network. In Brussels and Wallonia, there is no target currently. We work with the members of RREUSE. These are social economy actors always, but with a focus on training for people also here with a gap from the market. Currently, also member of RREUSE. So basically, currently, we have 41 centers that report to us their sales number, and these are our reuse numbers. So when we received the targets from the region of Flanders and Brussels, what happened? First and foremost, they created my post. They hired a reuse coordinator because we needed to achieve these targets, which is very high compared to the previous sales number. You can go to the next slide if you want. Second, we set up a new contract. We created a new contract with the reuse operators to remunerate them for the waste they collect and they give back to Recupel. And these are electronic appliances that people bring in a second-hand shop, and then they don't manage to repair it, so they give it back to Recupel. But we also now remunerate them for what they sell. And we have a twofold remuneration based on their numbers. If they achieve the benchmark, so the volumes they sold in 2020, which is the lowest sales number because they were mostly closed for COVID, they get a remuneration, but they get double the remuneration as soon as they go over those volumes of 2020. In return, we ask them to report to us every year, and all the electronic waste has to go to Recupel, so the network is closed and we can monitor what happens with the waste. there's something I picked up in what was said before about the quality of reporting. This is a concern we also have because many reuse centers are not very digitalized, I would say. So the report numbers, I think it's an underestimation of what is actually sold. For example, we know that some electronic appliances like toys, they have an electro function, but they're sold as toys and they're not reported as electro.
But
So,
it's a half minute.
okay, next slide. I think this was the most important things about the reuse targets. Yeah, I wanted to show you where the target is and where we are now. So the target in Flanders is based on the mean volume between 2017 and 2019. You can see the numbers of 2020, 2021 during COVID and where we stand today, which is going up in a nice way. But the target, I think in the slide, the target has moved because it's much higher. So it's difficult to, I'm just saying it's difficult to reach this target knowing that we have influence, we have a limited influence on their business because these are their sales numbers. So if they
Thank you,
lack
Vanessa.
repairs, well,
Thank you.
that's
I'm
an issue.
sorry, I will have to be
That's it. That was my last point.
Perfect. Excellent. So we are now on track to hear, Marijan, you can move forward. Perfect. We are on track to hear now what we recommend. So we heard about EU policies, we heard about national situation in a few cases, and now we would like to present what is in our report as policy recommendations. So Marijan, take it away. And I will ask you to be a little shorter than we said. I did something wrong with the timing so that we can have a brief exchange with the MEP before he has to go. Thank you.
Sure. So I will now share the main recommendations from the report on how to best set and monitor reuse and preparing for reuse targets. The first recommendation, it's quite general, is to set binding targets because this is the way to create a unified approach across Europe and to avoid additional administrative burden for public authorities. And the most efficient way to do so is to start with setting the mandatory targets as the EPR requirements in EU legislation. The second recommendation is also something that we have been keeping on repeating across time, is that we need separate reuse and preparing for reuse targets, separate from recycling targets, because it has been observed that the lack of distinction between reuse and recycling targets leads to undermining of the waste hierarchy, to recycling being prioritized under EPR schemes, and as a consequence, diversion of funding away from prevention activities. So as a way forward, we need to systematically differentiate between reuse and recycling targets. We also advocate for giving priority to product streams covered by EPR schemes when setting targets. It's because most of the time EPR schemes are covering quite polluting streams, so they can have a stronger impact. It's also because to facilitate the process, because we talked a lot again about data, and with EPR schemes, data is already available. And it would allow to combine data from reuse networks and EPR schemes, which is the way we favored by looking at the research insights. It seems like the most valuable way to do so. And by also using EPR schemes directly, producers would be responsible for meeting the targets. We would need also financial sanctions in case of non-compliance in member states to enforce compliance. This next recommendation is also linked to it, because in addition to EPR scheme, we also recommend targets, especially for product streams that have the highest environmental impact and also the job creation potential. More specifically, when we say environmental impact, we talk about the high reuse potential and also high CO2 emission reduction potential. And here we recommend them to establish as a priority targets for textiles, electronic waste, furniture, and mattresses. I mentioned previously that we are looking also in the research into the different type of channels that should be included, and we recommend to use only the formal reuse activities. We know that's not the path that has been chosen for all the targets, but we see it as the way to get the most reliable data, and also to make sure that the monitoring is as easy as possible. So basically to ensure the feasibility of the target. That's why as formal channels, we mean the channel covered by EPR scheme, social enterprises, public authorities, and also other reuse operators. We have a couple of recommendation or an analysis in the report of the different type of indicators. So I think for the sake of time, I won't look into all of them, but basically our recommendation here is to really align the indicators across member states, because we see that currently there can be an issue of fragmented reporting methodology across the EU. Linked to the reporting and monitoring, we recommend to set targets based on a reliable baseline. And for this, if the baseline is not available yet, we recommend PRO to fund data collection. Or a way to do this would also be to set targets as an increase of reuse by a certain percentage by a certain year relative to the baseline. In the same idea of the need for easily implementable and feasible and achievable targets, we recommend to set them in incremental increases. That would also allow to account for product lifetime. And how to do it would be via regular progress reviews and also by adjusting the strategy as needed. We said that it's better to have targets as part of the EPR scheme. This is also because we need to ensure that data collection is covered by EPR schemes. And beyond the funding of data collection, we recommend to harmonize the reporting requirements to reduce administrative burden in the long term. I mentioned the different point of measurement, and the one that we clearly put forward in the report is to measure reuse at the point of sale. That would ensure the accuracy of reuse figures. And that's the final and very also general recommendation. We recommend to put targets as part of a broader long-term strategy to promote reuse and also inclusive employment. This is because targets do not exist in a vacuum. They are part of a circular strategy, and that would enable the necessary infrastructure and legislative framework to support reuse.
Thank you very much. So I hope everybody paid attention. These was the key points that we wanted to make in the report. Now, as mentioned, MEP Nordquist has to run quickly or soon. So I would just like to use these last few minutes to actually ask you if just your feedback to what you heard now. Has your mind shifted? Has your conviction been reinforced? What's your reaction to everything that you have heard?
Well, thank you very much, and I can just say to everybody here that actually I have met with Reuse before, so they had the chance to lobby already. No, first I just want to make a comment because I really thought the presentation from Rebecca from Ireland was really interesting. I thought I knew that what there was to know about this area for many member states, but this was new. I thought it was really interesting and impressive work that has been done on methodology. And I will dive into that because I think also there is a real need that we try and harmonize the approach across the EU member states. Because for me, the key about all these issues is that we getting, whether it's reuse or recycling, we get the whole circular economy out of a nice to have niche and get it into the industrial policy, into the real public procurement, where the 40% of the European GDP is being spent. I mean, we need to scale up, and therefore we need it to be an EU question, an EU matter, where we also have a harmonization so we can work on this on the internal market. So that was one point. Then I think your point on having specific targets for both reuse and recycling, I think is strong. I just think we also have to be aware, because you spoke a lot about that, and I know I mentioned it before to you directly as well, that when you talk about, you often talked about the funding coming from EPR. What I would like us to know, to think, is also to think actual business model. How do we get that in? And that's why I've been pushing on the trade measures to get prices up on a lot of other things, because when I see a lot of the actors who are working with reuse and who actually refurbish things and make them ready for market again, I mean, I see very interesting business model. And I think that's one thinking I would like us to also try and push now, is how do we get these business model to actually function, and to function as well within the internal market, so we can have the, not just the support and via the EPR schemes, but also have the push from the demand through good and healthy business model. I think that should be a focus as well, or it will be, at least from my perspective. Last point is on the indicators you pointed to. Again, I'm back to this. Let's get European answers to these things. And we know that we can come up with right indicators, but that's also why we can actually see what impact are we having, and not just the output of the whole thing. And I think that's the refocusing we need to help the Commission to understand. That was diplomatic ending.
Well, that's your job, to be diplomatic. So thank you very much, but also thank you really for supporting this general ask for the targets. And I hope that indeed you have met with us before. I hope that we will keep exchanging, and I also especially hope that you will also be able to bring more MEPs on board your circular economy train, because as I mentioned at a recent event, we noticed that it's not the highest on their agenda. But with the Circular Economy Act, hopefully this will shift. And with the WE Directive revision, we really count on you also to be the driver in the Parliament, considering your personal affiliation with the circular economy, which we really appreciate. So thank you so much for joining us. I know you have to
Well,
run.
thank you to all of you for taking time on a Friday afternoon. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. And now we will continue this webinar with a conversation with our other speakers. Marijan, would you go forward, please? Indeed. So there's been a lot of interest in what happened in Ireland. Rebecca, you see people are very excited, and you can all read, of course, more about this target in our report. We do go country by country in the report, as well as target by target. So we will get more information there. But Rebecca, now targets, of course, as we said here several times, are only one piece of the puzzle. We think it's a very important piece of the puzzle. But please tell us, from the Irish perspective, what role do these RREUSE targets play in this broader Irish circular economy strategy?
Thanks, Mel, and it's really lovely to see the warmth towards the report, and I'll share another report in the chat afterwards. It comes at an interesting time. So at the same time as the consultation for the EU Circular Economy Act, Ireland launched a public consultation in relation to a whole of government circular economy strategy, which for the first time will have a statutory basis for us. So I will say both consultations were due a day apart, so we were having lots of fun writing policy submissions. But they play, I suppose, a genuinely strategic role in the emerging circular economy approach. And with the government now finalising the first strategy and a whole of government, so not just one department, across all government departments strategy, we are at that point of where the country is deciding on how it wants to structure the resource for that strategy. And reuse targets are one of those tools kind of in that structural reset. Again, I suppose for a long time, Ireland has relied on circular material use rate as its main metric, and in the new strategy it does continue to kind of put an emphasis on that. But I suppose that only tells part of the story, because it's measuring recycling, not prevention, repair, and reuse. And in practice, I suppose it has then reinforced that a recycling first mindset, and that also ties into kind of what I mentioned earlier of how the repair and reuse system is structured in Ireland. So the strategy has set out 10 actions or no, say 10 objectives and over 70 actions. So it was a lengthy piece, but not, I suppose, necessarily directly tied to individual targets in those. So this is something that we have been pushing for, and I know a lot of our colleagues in Ireland have, is that what is really great to have these ambitious objectives and actions set out, that we would like them to paired with binding targets on them. So I suppose when I was referring to earlier the reuse per person, we have a target in another strategy, so the National Waste Management Plan for Circular Economy, which by 2030 it goes beyond what we found in the report to look to have a 20 kg of reuse per person by 2030, and we want to see that then reflected in the circular economy strategy, and have a statutory kind of target on that. And the significance of that figure goes far beyond the number of cells. I suppose it gives government, local authorities, again, who aren't at the table as much on that conversation reuse, and the reuse sector, that shared benchmark for that infrastructure, the capacity and skills to be developed, and then it will align Ireland with the wider European thinking in preparation for reuse, the social economy-driven circularity. And I suppose there's also the social dimension, and just to note this as well in terms of in the wider circular economy strategy, that much, as I mentioned, much of Ireland's repair and reuse activity is delivered through social enterprises. And these organisations provide training, employment, and pathways to strong community benefits. So when reuse is formally counted and targeted, the social value is then further recognised within national policy, and it really strengthens the role of the social economy in the transition to a circular economy. And I suppose finally, the targets improve the governance, and this was a big part of the circular economy strategy, was the governance structure for this, which again we really welcome to see that robust governance structure in the proposed strategy. But Ireland must set those sectorial targets, actions, I suppose, for textiles, construction, electronics, packaging, and more, and embedding these across the sector, not just having, I suppose, a general one of per person, really having the sectorial breakdown. It brings, I suppose, that transparency, coherence, and accountability into how resources are managed across the country. I think I could be at my 5 minutes, so I'll leave you there.
Thank you very much. Everybody's taking it. They're binding. It's a binding target. It's strictly enforced. Thank you very much. So now we heard about Ireland, and now we will go to Italy and back to Nicola. So we would like to hear from you about your opinion. How would reuse and preparing for reuse targets help improve the situation in Italy? You described it before. So how do you think these targets could make a difference?
Well, so of course I don't have a kind of crystal ball, and I can see the future, but I can imagine from what I've been heard now. And well, the impact, of course, is that with targets we would have a better reuse, of course, activities and make it more visible. But I'm more interested in the non-direct impact of the targets, because in my opinion it will be a kind of leverage on other aspects of circular and social economies, because we can make a lot of different examples. Having targets on reuse and preparation for reuse will indirectly benefit, for example, to eco-design. Before we were speaking about the fact that not just one, how to say, action can change everything. We cannot change everything with only eco-design or only targets. or only APR schemes change, okay? But all these things together move together. So in my opinion, it's go further beyond the only impact on the reuse, but it benefit to the whole economy and the social. I hate the word resilience, but it has to do with this thing, resilience, which is like a sauce you use for every meal now, okay, in language. But so that's really important in our opinion. Another point that I heard before, and I share absolutely, is this thing about harmonization of about kind of having the same level in Europe on this kind of things, because as I said during my first intervention, we feel a big gap between Italy and other places, like we were hearing now, Ireland, but also Belgium is like for us is another universe. Okay, we don't have all these things, APR schemes or whatever, providing or even just having a dialogue with other stakeholders. This is thing we would really be really happy to have. So that's more or less what I expect to have. And well, of course, the big thing, as I told before, would be to have regulation instead of a directive on the we, because it will make a more coherent policy in Europe. And also one point is about scaling really the reuse economy, okay, scaling to industrial level, because there is the opportunity to make something really more impactful, more effective to society, more people working, more environmental benefit, less resources consumed, less waste produced, and so on. So that's why, in my opinion, as this little thin thing of the target, which seems to be a clue in the laws, might move a lot of other things. That's, well, my point of view.
Thank you, Nicolas. And indeed, now we will go to the promised land of Belgium to hear, of course, there are downsides here as well and problems. I was joking, but because you were saying it is definitely much better than in Italy, because the system is so much more advanced in that sense. So we will go back to Vanessa to hear from you. So how have reuse targets contributed to the development of a better collection and reuse system for WE, including collaboration between key actors? You already mentioned some, but now if we focus specifically on that.
Well, I find very interesting that Nicola talks about the fact that Italian EPR scheme basically keeps out key actors. And I think the reuse target actually help a lot to bring stakeholders together. I prepared a cartography of the reuse centers in Belgium, but I think I'm just gonna freewheel here because I'm interested in a lot of I'm hearing a lot of things I want to pick up on. I think first and foremost, we have in Belgium, it is very locally developed reuse. So you can see you have Flanders on the top, Brussels in the middle, Wallonia on the bottom. It's full of reuse centers that are certified. They're not Senelec certified, but they have a history. People know them, people know their brands, so they trust them. And what the reuse targets helped us do is first to integrate reuse in our reverse logistic. And this is very important because reuse actually is about nitty-gritty logistical work. You need to give these appliances to the reuse centers instead of giving them to the recyclers. So we integrated selection points in the logistical chain, and we also created more moments and more places where the reuse centers can make a selection. And we work a lot with producers, retailers that are our members, and we put them in contact with the reuse center. So we actually pick up the phone. We say, you are obliged to work with the reuse centers if you have a distribution contract with Recupel. And we foster these synergies, and it works because we are seeing producers like BSH, DeLonghi, Electrolux, they want to take some steps in the circular economy, but often they don't know how. And we are providing a very simple solution. We're saying instead of giving us your waste and putting it in a container of Recupel, you set it on the side, and the reuse center that is close to you, and you can see on the map how many there are, will come by every week and it will make a selection of appliances. We're also trying to, as the producer, to send the flows that they don't repair because the value is too low for some small electro appliances, to give this to the social economy, because as the social economy is subsidized, they manage to repair these flows. So there is a lot that these reuse targets do. They change the way we collect, although we still have a lot of work to do for sure, because it still remains a priority to collect as much as possible, which means that the recipients in which you collect are not done for reuse, they're done for capacity, so you don't protect the appliances well enough. So we're working to change that, but especially we keep underlining that this is an all actors approach and we have to include every single actor in the chain. So it's the waste public authorities, the waste collectors, the private ones, the social ones, the producers, the retailers, they all come together and we need to move and create a new chain. We're doing it little by little, but it stays local as well. So it's quite a challenge. And another point I heard about, which I absolutely agree on, is harmonization. We have the repair index now in Belgium, which is based very much on the French repair index. But we know that another one is coming from the European Union. These producers, which are our members, they sell as much in Belgium as in France, as in Spain. We need to have harmonized rules so that it becomes easier to work and to report in the same way. So if I still have a bit of time,
We do, 1 minute.
I will underline that a lot of the work Recupel does is about raising awareness among people, so the Belgian consumers, to where do they have to bring their appliances. And we also now integrated reuse, so we give national television spots and radio spots about bring it to your reuse centers nearby. Try to give first the item to a reuse center and then to Recupel. And even when you give it to Recupel, then you get a selection from the reuse centers. But there's a lot of work to do when we're putting things in place, but you can see how far we are from the targets there.
Thank
Finished.
Thank you very much. Marie-Jeanne, I think you can speed through Vanessa's slides to get to our Q&A, because now I am thrilled to say that we still have some time for discussion with the speakers and among the speakers. First, I will give you an opportunity to Rebecca and Nicolai, if there's anything you would like to add to what you have said now that you have heard each other. You're welcome to make a brief comment. And I also invite our participants, if you have questions for the speakers, I did note a few already, but if you have further questions, you can type them in the chat now. Is there anything you would like to come in with, Nicolai and Rebecca, before we go to the questions from the participants? You don't have to. Good.
Just one point. The question from Susan in the chat about combination reducing taxes and on goods and reused goods and raising taxes on virgin goods. We spoke about these kind of things, if I remember, 1 year ago with Matthias, was a year or so, about ambitious projects to put tax on virgin materials in general as a policy to reduce the consumption of natural resources. And this would be the ambitious point that goes beyond what we are speaking about now, because now we are a lot of beautiful small things, but beautiful small things. That was my consideration, just thanks to the Susan question. That's all.
Thank you. It's great you're already interacting with the questions in the chat. Rebecca, you're fine? Sounds like you are. So I have two questions I've noted that I will pose here. I think one is can be answered pretty briefly. It comes from Japan. I hope I can say to Mohiro Tasaki that it's somewhat okay. I think you're referring to the specific targets that were discussed here. So those would be from Ireland and Belgium. And you're asking if the targets count domestic reuse only, or can reuse abroad be counted? And is there a target for reuse inflows rather than reuse outflows? So Vanessa and Rebecca, would you like to respond?
Well, these are appliances for us. The reuse targets are on appliances that are sold by these centers. Some of these centers used to export part of appliances, but mainly textile. They don't do it on electro much. And we know that since a few years, they also don't export anything anymore. So I would say it's on domestic sales of domestic appliances also, not professional appliances.
Thank you. And Ireland?
Sorry, my laptop was having a moment there, so I missed that. You might not be able to hear me. I hope you can. You can. So, what was the question again?
The question, yes, the question is about whether these targets also only cover domestic reuse or also other reuse activities.
At the moment, the targets are looking at domestic, and as that is also a challenge in itself, it's starting there. So there would be the grand ambition. I would hope that it would expand. Apologies if this does cut out. I think my laptop is very much feeling that it is Friday afternoon.
No worries. We have another question from Craig Anderson from Reuse Network in the UK, who's asking whether speakers believe there may be a risk to setting reuse targets. I'm itching to answer, but of course I may not. And the argument is that it could that setting a target makes reuse commercially of interest to private sector waste companies. So the concern is whether this would actually have some negative impacts. What do speakers think about this very briefly?
I'm happy to kind of kick off on it. And I think that's where, the support and the structures need to be put in place alongside the targets. It cannot just be setting the target and then not supporting, particularly in the case of Ireland, where the reuse activity is happening at that local level, there needs to be the relevant structures and financial support to enable that, to avoid that, that scenario of it going down that route. I also think, there is challenges in terms of entering the market from the Irish perspective of entering it at that larger scale. But I recognise that, and I saw the comment. I found it very interesting. It is something that I would consider, but we would push for financial support and system support at that local level.
Would anybody else like to come in on this?
I agree with what Rebecca is saying. I don't see really such a risk in Belgium at the moment because the targets are with the social economy. So we're protecting the social economy that way. There are many, many actors that are having reuse activities and they're interested in it. And some of them don't follow for the waste part, but just the refurbishing. But it's true. I mean, it's something that we need to be mindful of because it's easy to in the regular economy, in the private economy, they have more means than in the social economy. It would be easier for them to cannibalize the market. So at the moment, though, in Belgium, it's set on the social economy.
Nicola, you have any opinions?
I would just add that here in Italy that we have less laws on this kind of things. We are feeling the cannibalization, as Vanessa said, from the, I would say also the gray economy, which is not, black economy, but a lot of factors on the market acting in a kind of gray zone, doing also good things like prevention, but they are definitely really private, profit-oriented organizations. If you regulate this with targets, perhaps you can have a better result in terms of social impact than what is going on now here in Italy, in my opinion.
Thank you. And we have a question. I don't dare say the name because I'm afraid I'm going to butcher it, but it's from Denmark. And the question is, how do you see best practice organization of not only reuse collection, but forwarding these into refurbishment when needed? And the note is that it seems that the Belgian and the Irish models differ in this regard. Shall we start with Belgium this time?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. Could you repeat it, please?
Yes, it's written in the chat. It says, how do you see best practice organizations? So not only the reuse collection, but forwarding these into refurbishment when needed. And I know that in Belgium, of course, because you're working with social enterprises, that this is also what's happening to a point. But if you have more to say about this, so not only to collect for reuse, but also to forward for refurbishment when it has to happen, what would be best practice there, if I understand correctly?
What we see, for example, in the Wallonian region, that differs enormously from Flanders. They are transporters, they are waste collectors that have also established a reuse center. And I have to say, this for me is a best practice because when they go collect the items, they immediately are careful to how they handle the item, not to ruin them, because they determine immediately the potential for reuse. In Flanders, it works differently. It's a transporter that we subcontract for Recupel. They will win a tender to become transporters. And this we see it when it's a logistical actor that has no reuse activities. They don't pay the same attention, even if they sign a contract in which they say they have to pay attention. To me, the ideal word is a reuse center that is also a collector, because then they have immediately access to appliances and they know how to treat them correctly.
Any opinions from Ireland on this?
I would agree that, yeah, best practice would be, a place that is a reuse center and a collector, if taking into consideration the rediscovery view on this. So we are a social enterprise, and we have, for example, furniture. So we get donations or we collect furniture and we bring it through refurbishment. And so it could be, items that need something, or, adding that added value to it, so that it will, has another life. But I completely agree. A project that we're due to kick off probably on Monday, the 1st of December, is working with civic amenity sites on being that both a collector and a reuse site as well, and how that could look in the future. So yeah, I very much echo what Vanessa was saying there.
Sorry, I'm being technologically challenged as well. All right, thank you for these. This is the final call. If anybody still have a question for the speakers, let me do a quick look. The report does also, there was a question whether the report also covers what happens and who's responsible if targets are missed. We do also look into the monitoring and enforcement and whether the targets are binding. Unfortunately, I will say, spoiler alert, that nothing much, but there are different diverse approaches to this. And also I should mention that of the targets that we identified, so we said 24, not all of them are still in place. But you can find more details in the report. I pasted the link in the chat, and as mentioned, we will have a QR code also at the end. Someone is asking whether there's any information regarding the amount of products that actually get reused after being prepared for reuse. Max Russell, sorry. And although an item may be theoretically reusable, it may not always find a new home. And they say this might be particularly a problem for WE. Are you aware of any studies that explore this rate, or do you have anything you can share in response to this question? Any of the speakers?
Can answer this. We know from the reuse centers, they tell us themselves, everything they repair and goes to the shop is sold when it's about WE. And but when they go collect appliances that have been centralized by producers or retailers, so appliances that people threw away, gave back to the shop when they bought a new one, then there is a 30% recovery rate on those appliances. but the selection on reuse, so they start preparing for reuse when the chances are extremely high that it can be reused. Otherwise, it's not profitable for them.
Thank you very much. Now we are nearing the end of our time, so I will just give the opportunity to our speakers if you would like to make a closing comment, or as I like to ask when I moderate, I like to ask speakers if the participants only take away one thing from everything you said, what would you like them to walk away with? Who should I begin with, or who has the first? Who would like to have the first word? Nicola, let's hear from you. We haven't heard from you in a bit. And I don't want to put too much pressure. It's just if you want to make a closing remark, now this would be the time. I think that Nicola froze for us. So I will, maybe, Emma, if you can just mute him momentarily. And can we go to Rebecca? And hopefully Nicola will be able to come back.
I definitely think there's some
We
Zoom gremlins.
directive revision, and then we'll see in future. That's all.
Thank you, Nicola. I'm so sorry to say that you froze for us for a little bit. So we didn't hear much of what you said. Would you like to repeat? It was a very brief comment, so I think we have time for you to repeat.
Okay. No, I was saying I don't have really a big thing to say at the end of this thing, because I received a lot of information that I have to elaborate. So just waiting for the future. Nothing to add.
Well, great. I'm very happy that you also found the information useful, and hopefully it will support your advocacy and work in Italy in general. Vanessa and Rebecca, maybe go to Vanessa next.
Yeah, I think I keep repeating harmonization, very important if you push producers to go to in the same direction in all of Europe. Is much easier to convince them to do something. But reuse stays local. It's a nitty-gritty work. You have to push one by one, and the reuse centers and the producers, and try to understand where the synergies can be created and where you can solve both parties' problems. So that's what I would insist on.
Thank you so much for giving us the perspective from an EPR. That's really valuable. And now, Rebecca, to you.
I'm going to reuse both Nikolai and Vanessa's answers and agree that, reuse does stay local, and we support at a local level. Where those targets are there, we provide that financial and structural support, but also that I learned a lot from the chat and the discussion. I was copying down answers. So thank you to the participants as well.
Well, that's fantastic. And we are nearly at the end. As mentioned, I pasted already the link to our report. I would just like to wrap up by emphasizing again that we really consider targets vital in the broad array of measures that are needed to improve the situation we have currently with the waste crisis. And overproduction and all the issues that we see, and the environmental unsustainability that we are basically living with our consumption and everyday lives. And we know that currently at the EU level, there are very relevant policy processes ongoing. So there are opportunities there for policymakers to act and to take these recommendations that we made on board, and to introduce really mandatory, separate, quantitative, binding targets for reuse and preparing for reuse, as they are developing currently the Circular Economy Act, as well as revising the WE directive. There are very clear opportunities, which is, of course, also what prompted us to put out the report at this particular time. We think it's really timely, and we really hope that it will make a difference in the future, of course, for all of us. Now you see the final slide. There's a QR code that you can scan, or you can click on the link. I would really like to thank you all for taking the time, indeed, on a Friday afternoon, all our speakers for your invaluable insights. You saw there was a lot of engagement. There are a lot of positive comments in the chat. Thank you all for this and for being here. Also, of course, to you, the participants, for joining us. Please keep following us. We as RREUSE, we are Europe's largest network of social enterprises in the circular economy, and we regularly produce reports that are of high relevance for the policy processes that are ongoing, as well as the social and circular sector as a whole. So we work at the intersection of social and environmental policies, and we try to create a better and more enabling environment for the social enterprises in the circular economy in pursuit of an inclusive circular economy for all and well-being for the people and the planet. Thank you again for being here. Please keep following us, keep joining us, and let's all hope and push for strong policy instruments in the mandate of this European Commission. Thank you again, and I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Bye.